Okay.
Okay.
Quick housekeeping matter. We turned our exhibits over last Thursday and provided those to everybody. We did file a demand for discovery. We haven't seen any exhibits yet from any of the defendants. Obviously, it's a busy time in the trial. We're not expecting them to flip those over right this instant, but sometime between maybe today and the end of the day tomorrow, if we could get.
I get it.
Yeah.
Where are we at with that?
I can tell.
And we'd like to see them and review them.
Yeah, I'll identify which specific memes that we're going to use if they don't put them. In terms of my opening, I'm just going to be referencing the full audios that they've already played.
Okay. Anybody?
Your Honor, mine will be the exhibits that they use. I can make my case with that.
Mine will be depending upon what I got some of the audios they're playing from the July 7th meeting. And also the text or the chat group discussion of when Paul leaves the group, and the entire chat session on August 18th, not just what they have in their exhibit, but the remainder of it. As of right now, that appears to me to be the only exhibits I'm gonna have. And they have all that stuff already. They gave it to me.
Yeah, but they still need to know what you're in.
As of right now, I mean, unless for rebuttal, I'm gonna be using a lot of their exhibits for cross-examination. I'm gonna be using their exhibits for my own cross-examination of some of the witnesses, but stuff I haven't seen the full text thread or chat thread of when Paul says he's leaving the group. And then also the August 18th, when he sends out a notice the cops were at his house. I'm gonna want that entire thing put in. And then I may want to play more of the July 7th hearing or meeting.
Anything else?
No, I'm just, because I understand for impeachment, I may use things that I may not ask it.
Right, I get that.
Totally different.
But I'll tell you.
Anybody
I
in
know.
your case in chief?
Yeah, I thought it was only 4 or
Okay,
5
get it
people.
to whatever, get it to them by 5 o'clock tomorrow.
Okay.
Good, thank you, Judge.
Okay, ready for the jury?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead and bring them in, David.
That's why I'm not calling.
Pause the one video.
Yeah, well, I agree. We can follow up, you know. Right. Want me to go get them, Dave?
If you like, yeah, I just, the video, I'm sure
Yeah,
it's
Paul,
paused. Yep, it just went off.
And relocate.
He's in charge of turning my video off.
I did not,
Okay.
I didn't.
But it's facing the judge.
The podium was moved, sorry.
Yeah, it was moved over.
Okay.
And it can go back, so it's not, if you want.
That was just my concern, is that I'm kind of right on top of.
Yeah, it can move back a little bit if you want. Just move it back right now before.
And now, is that the court's order? So, you know, I like to stay here.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay.
It's apparently there's a lot of chat. We're trying to shut the chat down. But enough people are watching. I want them to be able to see. So I'd rather have them
Right
watching
in
than
the
sitting
camera,
here,
so you're
quite frankly.
you're front and center.
That camera adds like 10 to 15 pounds. 4 pounds in my head, about 15 pounds everywhere else.
I think Mr. Baylor said something about your head earlier.
Probably I did.
I didn't hear it.
All right, for the jury.
Please be seated. I'm sorry.
I could have just.
Okay. Which one of you wants to go next?
Oh, next, Your Honor. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome back. I hope lunch was satisfying. Hopefully you're not too full. I'll try to keep this short, brief, keep it up a little bit so we're not getting tired after lunch. I believe the first thing that you heard this morning was the statement that this is a very simple case, but it didn't really outline that way as we sat here and listened to the prosecution's opening statement. But in reality, it actually is a really simple case. There's not a lot of moving parts unless you're trying to just shovel things against the wall and see what sticks. We've got a number of things to flush out here over these next couple weeks, right? And I believe both prosecution, brother counsel, Mr. Kirkpatrick, talked about the jury instructions. Now, like we said, you're going to get a copy of these. You'll get to go back. But one of the things I want you to remember, during voir dire, we talked about if there's 5 elements, you can't get 4.9 to convict. You got to have all 5. And as I listened to these jury instructions and as I've read them and as I've contemplated this case, there's a number of problems with it. Mr. Kirkpatrick highlighted a couple, but let's talk about a gang. Right? We keep hearing gang, 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 gang. Well, I believe someone yesterday commented that they keep hearing these same questions in their sleep, right? Well, probably you're going to go home and keep hearing gang, gang, gang. And I'll tell you, I'm going to go home and go, well, gee, my poker playing buddies and I must be a gang. The guys that I ride motorcycles with, we must be a gang. Because as I read this and I go, group of 5, we have common unifying mark, or we have some way of expressing membership. We have that. We have a common leadership structure. Well, whoever's riding out front, that's the leader that day. All right. But what you don't hear, what the prosecution didn't give you, and what I want you to listen for is this constant communication, this constant connection of people. Because one of the things you're going to hear in this trial is Joe disappears. He's just gone. You're going to hear testimony from Dan, how he had to reel him in, how we couldn't find him, how Joe's a ghost. I don't know how you can be in constant communication if you're just a ghost, right? Joe had a multitude of things going on, not least of which was this. It was what it was to him. He had a family, he had a job, he had other aspects to his life. This wasn't this all-encompassing driving force for him like they want to make it out to be. It just wasn't. And I want you to listen for that. And why is that important when I ask you to listen for it? Because one of the other things that we talked about in voir dire was the creation of reasonable doubt. And Mr. Johnson correctly brought up that it's not just the evidence that you hear, but it's the lack of evidence that you don't hear and the context in which it's given to you. We talked about this almost ad nauseum, right? You probably heard that in your sleep last night because I talked about it so much in voir dire. So let's talk about these aspects of what they're trying to give you. I believe you were told in opening that Adam Fox's plan was to kill police. Adam Fox, we've all agreed, was the terrorist. Barry Croft was the terrorist. That's what you were given by the prosecution. That's what brother counsel agreed to, right? I have no argument with that. But that's not these guys. That's certainly not Joe Morris. Excuse me. The gang that they're trying to sell you on is what they're trying to use to make the rest of this. This is some big nefarious, I don't know, collection of criminals. No, that's not the case here. This is a collection of guys who sat there and said, I'm tired. I'm frustrated. And that's what you're going to hear from them. And we all talked about it's okay to be frustrated with your government. Right? You kept hearing how they would go with their kits and their sidearm and their long rifle and their multiple ammunition packs and their extra ammo. I don't know that there was ammo in any of those guns. The prosecution doesn't know. They don't know if there was ammunition in those magazines when they were at these protests. So again, we're just saying these things to see what we can put out there, right? We're trying to sell you on this. I don't see it. I got to be honest with you. The other thing I need you to listen to, and I need you to listen to very carefully, because it goes to, as Mr. Kirkpatrick told you, right, that first big crime, material support of terrorism. Because if that falls, everything else falls away with it. So let's ask ourselves, what was this material support? And again, you're going to get this sheet with all the jury instructions on it. And it's going to tell you that material support is providing currency. There's no evidence that they paid for anything, that they gave currency, that they provided financial services, lodging, safe houses, documentation, identification. None of that is going to come in. But I think one of the other things that Mr. Ralston told you is they were seeking out someone to train. Let's ask ourselves, and watch for this when we go through, who was doing the training? Because I can tell you who was doing the training. It wasn't Joe Morrison. It wasn't Pete Musico. It wasn't Paul Bellar. It was Dan. Dan is the one who was there teaching them all of these techniques. Why? Because Dan does it for a living. We want to seem to somehow forget, but there's testimony, and you will hear this, that Dan's job that he does on his own is professionally train people. What a better person to put in this location to train this terrorist than someone who trains people for a living. This military hero who came back with all of this knowledge was sent out to train. Now, I believe Mr. Ralston told you that's the crux of the crime. They were providing training for this terrorist. But who gave them the training? Dan. And why is that significant? Because you're going to hear testimony that Dan was told, you can't do anything illegal. I believe the FBI calls it an admonishment when they bring in a confidential human source. You can't do anything illegal. Then how is training this guy illegal? And if that's what he's allowed to do, then who's really at fault here? Who's really committing the crime? Who's putting the crime out there to be committed? Not Joe Morrison. Joe Morrison didn't train anybody. Joe Morrison was a reservist. Okay, so he was a reservist, right? So let's talk about that for a second, because a big deal was made about all of these secret code words this morning. And I believe the term used was, well, they used the term patriot on their site, but we all know that means terrorist. I think if you look up patriot in the dictionary, it might mean patriot. Right? It doesn't have to mean terrorist. They're looking for people that think like them, that say to themselves, this is an unprecedented time. And I'm not referring simply to COVID. That whole span of time was a time that you didn't see coming. I didn't see coming, right? But these men said, you know what? I don't know what's going to happen. You can't turn on late night TV and not see some company trying to sell you safety provisions, food for the impending whatever, put it on your shelf, will last 50 years. You can't watch that and not say to this man, you shouldn't consider your family a risk. Really? The whole world considers it that way. So why is he different? Why is he singled out? Why is he singled out when he's thinking about, how do I protect my family? What does that mean? How do I do this? Right? How do they do it? They put it out there and they say, hey, we're looking for like-minded people that think like we do, that want to train with us. And I think you're going to hear testimony from Dan that he was looking for training. He had all this training. He was a professional trainer. So I ask you to consider what the evidence really means. When he says, I'm looking for training, is it to teach something or is it to learn? Because if you're this great combat veteran who did 2 tours and was wounded, as they say, in Iraq, what does he need to train for? Or is he looking to sell his wares to someone willing to pay? Because I think you're going to hear that he gets paid $500 to teach people this stuff. $500. I believe you're also going to hear training, despite the contradiction to this, that this was a financial loss for Dan. But I think you're also going to hear that he got about 54 grand in cash over the time of this case. Right? I'd like someone to hand me an envelope with 54,000, not a check made out from Uncle Sam, thanks for helping me, but here's an envelope with some currency in it. You do with it what you want. Ugh. You're going to hear from the people that my client was the leader of this group. But I think you're also going to hear that there was an election held to identify the leader, and it was Dan. Dan is the one they voted to be the leader. Dan is the one who, the collection of the Wolverine Watchmen who are trying to create this safe zone for themselves and said, who can best lead us through this time? He voted for Dan. They didn't vote for Joe. They didn't vote for Pete, right? They didn't vote for Paul. And I'm going to use their names because that's their name. This is Paul. This is Joe. This is Pete, right? They're human beings just like the rest of us. I'm not going to call them the defendants. I'm not going to call them the charge, right? This is their name. So let's call it like it is. We heard testimony, or we heard it in the opening, excuse me, but you will hear testimony that Dan believes in America, that Dan is this patriot. But yet when they use patriot, that's somehow different than when our clients use patriot. He's the patriot. Dan believes in America. Who does Joe? Joe believes in his American ideal. What's a reasonable belief for Joe on what it's supposed to be and what he considers a reasonable risk. Dan believes in Dan. Dan believes in himself. And I want you to keep that thought in mind when he's standing up here testifying. You heard that Joe was the connection for Adam Fox. But I think the testimony will actually bear out from that seat right there that it was Dan that brought Adam Fox to Joe. I think you're going to hear testimony that when Dan approached Joe and said, hey, Joe, Adam Fox, we're going to bring it for training. We're going to do this. Joe said, oh, no. Crazy. Not my house. So what does Dan do? Dan's smart. I don't know if he did this on his own or if the FBI guided him, but Dan did what a lot of people do to married men. Called Joe's wife. Hey, Jada, I got this guy. I want to bring him in. That's how he got there. It wasn't through Joe. Dan had to go through the wife to say, this is who we need. We should associate ourselves with this. This is the guy. Jada, like-minded like Joe, how do we protect our family? This is the guy that can help us. Okay. So you bring him in and you listen and you hear in the initial stages until you go, no, not for me. This is not for me. And then again, Joe's just gone. He's gone until Dan has to throw out that fishing line and go, Joe's a ghost. What should I do here? How do I get him back involved? How do we get him back into the fold of this terrorist gang? That's how they make it work. You heard in the opening, and this really struck me. You heard in the opening where we wanted to put it up on the screen, Pete saying, well, this is how, I'm starting this group and this is my group. And Mr. Olson said, Pete founded this, Pete did this, Pete because of this, that, and whatever. And he took a breath, and then he tried to tell you that Joe started it because of some traffic stop in Macomb. Okay, let's talk about this traffic stop in Macomb. Yeah, Joe got, and you'll get testimony about this, so hold me to it, right? Because that's what they're claiming is the inception, the start of all of this. Joe's car breaks down, bad neighborhood, police officer comes, what's going on? Joe says, hey, I got a gun, right? I don't feel comfortable here. Joe gives it up. Trooper goes, gotta take you. Take him in, charge him. The prosecutor pleads it down to the misdemeanor. Here's your fine, have a good day. Joe pays his fine and goes on about his life. Not the case of, the crime of the century that makes you sit back and go, I've been unjustly treated. Pay the fine. Get a traffic ticket, you pay the fine. You get pulled over, you get stopped, maybe you're frustrated. Maybe you firmly believe that light was yellow, but you get the ticket for running the red and you pay. That's what happened with Joe. He did get a day in jail, but it had already been served. He got credit for the one day that he did when the trooper took him in. So the sentence, just so we're clear, whatever the fine was, I think it was $250. I may be wrong. In a day in jail. That's the end. Joe goes on about his life. Not the biggest event to drive somebody over the edge. Certainly not the crime that some trooper who they claim was his gunnery sergeant, his mentor, would reach out and do something about. I think you're going to hear testimony that this mentor, who was so concerned about her young Marine, never reached out, never tried to contact Joe, even though he was a reservist in her unit, never said, Joe, you okay? Seems odd, seems whatever. That's a mentor. That's the term used, mentor. And I said, I'm going to law school. I had a judge who mentored me, and he called me routinely. God, how's it going? How's this going for you? You need to talk about that. That's a mentor, not I saw him on the street. I saw him in the Capitol, and you let him go. So let's call things what they are. Abraham Lincoln once said, how many legs does a dog have if you tell him his tail is 11? The answer is 4. I don't care what you call the tail, it's still a tail. He's got 4 legs. So let's call things what they are. If it's not a mentor, don't call him that. Let's not try to lasso all this in, because that's not the case. You were told that these guys were concerned going to protests to police the police. They were going to the Black Lives Matters protests to police the police. The AG takes offense to that. I wonder if George Floyd wishes somebody was there to police the police. Right? We showed this photograph up here of these guys at the Capitol, none of whom are breaking the law. None of them got arrested for being there. They're just there, legally there, possessing tools that they can legally possess. And we're told, well, Pete's, got his phone out, photographing this. Okay. Again, I ask you, we didn't have the photographs, we didn't have the video of George Floyd, where would we be today? These things mattered to these guys. This kind of life that it was involving into scared this man, and rightfully so. I would tell you, it scares a lot of people, a lot more than we're willing to recognize, but it's a reality. This isn't just about COVID. This isn't just about we got shut down because people had to get a shot or no shot or had to wear a mask or no mask. It was this evolving time. Well, they were wearing Hawaiian shirts. Guess what? My buddies and I, when we go golfing, I got the same shirts. I do. They showed the shirt up here, the red Hawaiian shirt. I think it was Adam Fox or Barry Croft or one of them had it on. I promise you, a month ago, they had Magnum PI Day at Tiger Stadium, and 50 people had the exact red shirt on. Were they a gang? Or were they just 50 people who went, you know what? I'm going to Tiger Stadium. I'm going for Magnum PI Day. They want you to listen to this narrative that they gave you earlier today. And again, I'm going to say this to you as I'm trying to wrap this up. I promised you I'd be brief. I want you to listen to what you hear. I need you to listen to what you don't hear. Please take it in the context that it's coming from. You're going to hear, it's easy to sell and say, you know, I can go home and go, oh, my kid's a bad kid. Well, that just meant he didn't pick up the garbage like I told him. What's the context that I'm calling him a bad kid? And what's the context that we're calling these guys this gang? Gang. No, it's a group of people that had a concern of where this country was going. And this country was founded on people who will say no to government. You can't do this. And this wasn't an attack on Whitmer, right? Because they want to tell you, no, they were gonna do this to Whitmer. They had Trump up there. Do we honestly think Joe is going to drive to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue and do something to Trump? No, it's a meme, right? And I challenge anyone in here to tell me they haven't gotten a meme sent to them by some friend who they may have looked at it and went, yeah, this is inappropriate, but it's funny as hell. And sent it on. Or maybe they deleted it, but it doesn't matter because it was shared amongst this closed little group. They want to make a big deal about how on Facebook, when Dan signed into Facebook, he saw all this and this threat to law enforcement, and how once he got vetted, he got into the secret wire chat. Okay. Well, it's not all that secret. Anybody can have this. It's not an illegal thing to have. Right? Wire is not illegal. It's out there. I don't know what people use it for. Right? Maybe married guys use it to cheat. Maybe married women use it to cheat. I don't know, right? But it keeps other people out of your business. And that's a big issue in today's America. Stay out of my business. Stay out, Big Brother. Stay out, 1984, George Orwell. I don't need this in my life. And that's where they were. They were at the point of going, I'm done here. And I don't know where this is going. But I'm going to listen and I'm going to hear. I'm not Jewish, but I've gone to a synagogue and listened to hear what it's about. I went to Desert Shield and Desert Storm. I didn't know any Muslims, but I read the Quran. I wanted to know. I needed to know what it was. These guys took the time to listen and go, what are we dealing with here in today's America? And they thought about it. And then when they saw where it was going, we're done here, right? They didn't train a terrorist. The FBI's CHS trained the terrorist. The terrorist that the FBI CHS brought to Munich, to Dunn Road. Adam Fox didn't show up on his own. And Joe didn't go pick him up and bring him. Dan did. Compensation work, I guess, for his $54,000. I don't know. But again, I'm asking you not only to listen to what you hear, but listen to what you don't hear. They threw out a lot of things this morning. And to be honest, I had a lot more notes here of things that I wanted to go over, but I think as I look through this panel, I see people that are reasonable in this, that can listen to what they hear and what they don't hear and go, here's the problem with this case. Maybe you got 4 out of 5 elements. Maybe there were more than 5 of them. Maybe they do have a secret handshake. My fraternity did. Right? I think the comment was made, Mr. Johnson had drawn the connection that churches, you know, a gang. Mr. Ralston said, well, they're not a 503 charitable or whatever, he quoted to you this morning. I can tell you, neither's my motorcycle group. Right? Neither's the guys I play poker with. Neither the guys I play golf with. Neither the 8 or 10 Marines that I get together with every couple, and have a few beers with, right? Not. It doesn't make us a gang. And again, what did they provide as part of this gang? Not finance, not money. In the service, they have 3 B's, bullets, beans, and bandages. They didn't provide any of that. That's the logistics you need to go to war. Bullets, beans, and bandages. Joe Morrison provided none of this. They're going to tell you, oh, well, it was done at his house. Okay. Open house on a free road in Jackson County that anybody could pull up to and drive up the driveway. And they made a big issue, right? I remember this specifically, and I wanted to talk about this. These guys were at the street. They were at the edge of Governor Whitmer's driveway. Joe wasn't. Joe didn't go there. Joe had already disassociated himself and said, no. I'm not doing this. So all of this stuff about Barry Croft and Adam Fox, and they went there and they were going to do this to her and they were going to do that. And it's not Joe. He didn't tell you Joe was going to do this. What did he tell you? That Joe trained him. No, it was Dan. And that they provided all this material support. They did this. They provided this training. Again, Dan. Well, they did it at his house. Okay, sometimes we play cards at my house. Right? If one of these guys goes and robs Mr. Ralston's proverbial bank after we play cards because he lost, that doesn't make us providing material support because we took his money. And if they come to my house and I lose and they take their money and go out and spend it on something illegal, I didn't provide material support just because it happened at my house. So the defensive stuff that they were seeking out, they hoped to find in Dan. Dan, who went on Facebook, saw these terrible things, and immediately called law enforcement. Thank you, Dan. I hope they have the evidence to show us what he saw, but I don't think they will. Because a multitude of professional law enforcement officers did not think it's smart to capture that as evidence for you, so that we could sit here and sort through this case. You're not going to hear that they have this in evidence, right? They've got all these other pictures. They've got the memes that these guys shared on their phones, and some of them they're going to show you, and some of them we're going to show you, and some are actually pretty funny. I'm not going to lie, they are. But when you look at the context, and we've talked about this incessantly, the context, when you get the kill Governor Whitmer, kill President Trump, and then, some guy teabagging another guy because they think it's funny because they're just not that mature, right? What's the context in this? Guys in a group try to outdo groups of guys, right? You tell me something, or I got something better, or I'll tell you this, or I'll do this. That's how it works. Right? We've all been a part of those peer groups that you just try to outdo the next one. That's what we come with. That's how it unfolds. But that's not the narrative they wanted to spin for you this morning. You were told this is going to be quick and simple, but it droned on for 2 hours. So it wasn't that quick and simple. And I got to be honest, I think I know this case pretty well. I believe defense counsel all knows this case pretty good. And without a map, you could lose your way to the story that we got this morning. Because remember what I told you, right? First it was Joe started, or first it was Pete that started it. Then it was Joe that started. And then Dan came along and he saw something. One of the things I think you need to listen for is, how did Dan get to see this? Dan, who was looking for this group, in order to see the things that they claimed he saw, which they don't have an evidence for you, he had to get vetted in order to get in there. So some of these questions that they're concerned about, he answered. Why did he answer? Because he honestly believes that and then saw the opportunity to take advantage of the FBI? Or because that's honestly how he believed and then went, ooh, I don't know. Let me hurry up and show this to the FBI. And the FBI counter-terrorist people didn't think to even take a screenshot. Now they're going to tell you, well, why you can't take a screenshot? No, you can't. I got this. This little light right here. This is just this photograph. You show me your phone, I can take a picture of it. There's my evidence, right? It's the start of the evidence that unfolds all this case for you. You're going to hear all this happened at this training and this happened at this training. And then the big June 28th training where we've got all this information and we've been recording everything. And, the big coup de grace for them. No, the camera didn't work. Just didn't work. Recording materials just didn't work. Really. It works for all this other stuff, but not this one. So we don't have the alpha or the omega of the Genesis, if you will. We don't have the start. We don't have the finish. It's got a bunch of placement stuff in the middle. Going to come down to these right here for you, ladies and gentlemen. All right. Jury instructions, and you're going to get them. Right. This is them. They'll be in your deliberation packet. And I guess what I want you to do for me, because y'all promised me you could do this. When they get to 4.8, 4.9 is their 5-element crime. Maybe they don't even get that far. I don't know. They can't get all 5. Remember, this isn't horseshoes, right? I don't get 2 points for a ringer and 1 point for a leaner. It's not 5 out of 5. We're done here. They didn't meet their burden. That's what I'm going to ask you to remember when you listen to what comes out of that chair. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson?
Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, my pen is out of ink.
We'll get you one right away.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Can everybody hear me okay from right here? I think as you know by now, my name is Kareem Johnson. And I represent Peak Music, sitting right here. And you have the responsibility over the next couple weeks or so to judge the government's case as to him, as well as the 2 individuals you see sitting next to him. So in cases like this, what I do is I take my notepad and I kind of turn it sideways. And I put all of the people there and I write down what I think is important to each one and see if it connects. That's what helps me. And this is now my time to give my opening statement as it applies to Mr. Music. Now, my opening statement is just merely sort of a movie preview of what the trial will be. And the trial, is a movie. And unfortunately, this trial, it's going to be one of those rather long movies where you're introducing multiple people, one of those Marvel movies, and it all comes to one big event. And as we've been talking about before, one of the important things that's going to be present in this case are the facts and the opinion. The facts come from the witness statement. It's the recording. It's the text message. It's the Facebook post. The opinions, the lawyers don't matter. You're going to be tasked at the appropriate time of determining what the context of those recordings, those chats, those messages are. Another thing that we see is going to be important in this case is what the law prohibits, what the law allows, and what the government just doesn't like. That was the point of the 501(c) comparison, right? Churches aren't required to file a 501(c). It's an IRS benefit you get, but you give up something. What you give up is important, particularly in this case. What you give up when you do that is the ability to combine and make political donations. What you give up when you do that is the ability to combine and make statements on behalf of the church. Speak up. That's what's important here. Because this training group, the Wolverine Watchmen, spoke up. We'll get to that at the appropriate time. And I'm going to also open a statement, explain to you my theory of the case, why I believe that Mr. Musico did not engage in material support of terrorism, why the Wolverine Watchmen training group is not a gang, and therefore he did not commit what we commonly call a felony firearm, commission of a felony while having possession of a handgun. And give you why I think the evidence is going to show that the government is wrong, and then prepare you for my closing argument. And if I do my job correctly, when I get up to give my closing argument, you're already going to know what I'm going to say. And it's not going to be just because you heard it 4 times before, right, from the other attorneys. It's going to be because, you know, hey, we went through this with Mr. Johnson and he taught us this. And so we know why this is important and why it's relevant. As we talked about before, dear, unfortunately, you're going to hear me talk last. And so a lot of the things you may hear from me are repetitive. They may be repetitive and there may be some fatigue, but all these things are important as they apply to Mr. Musico. Facts. Now, when I go through the facts to you in my opening statement, I'm going to take them in chronological order, which is something the government did not do in their opening statement. See, the first video they played you was from Mr. Musico was in September, and they were bouncing. Remember that chart they put up? They were bouncing from September to March, then to August, then to June, mixing it all up. Strategic reason why they're doing that. I'm going to lay it out in chronological order so you can see things how they actually happen. And then you can make the appropriate decision as to what people's intent was, right? Because if you mix up the order, you can mix up the intent. That's why it's important that when we take these notes, and when I speak to you again in my closing argument, I'm going to go again in chronological order. Now, chronological order of this case, around November, the Wolverine Watchmen training group was founded on Facebook. Prosecution, I think we see they're going to put up some exhibits and tell you to cross out words and put the words that they want you to use. No. The evidence is what the Facebook page says. We're going to make arguments at the end of this trial when the court tells us to. And both sides are going to give you our opinion on what that Facebook messages mean. But the fact is going to be that there's going to be a Facebook page. That Facebook page is going to have an administrator. Pete Musico was not and never was an administrator on that Facebook page. Now, the government wants you to believe, and I think they indicate they're going to try and prove, that Joe Morrison started this group because he was out in Macomb County one day, had contact with law enforcement, told the law enforcement, volunteered, have a gun in my hip, didn't argue with the cop, didn't fight with the cop, but was told, hey, technically, the way you got your setup here, you're carrying a concealed weapon in a motor vehicle. That's a felony. Got to place you under arrest. Take you in. As his attorney, Mr. Ballard, said, he goes in, he's there for a day, gets arraigned, bonds out. He eventually is offered a plea agreement. His felony is reduced to a misdemeanor. He is sentenced to credit for the night that he spent in jail and a fine. That's going to be the facts. Now, when the Judge Wilson tells us to, we're going to argue to you whether or not anybody would be upset about that. The Facebook page was seen at some point by Dan Chapman. Dan clicks on the link to join this training group. Now, I think you're going to hear that Dan wears a couple hats, okay? I think the testimony is going to be that he said he worked for the post office, but I think he actually works as a truck driver. So even though he testified under oath that he worked for the post office, he was a truck driver. And he also does some training for firearms, maybe side job, nothing wrong with that, right? But what's important is two things here. One, Dan joins the group. So whatever he saw on Facebook didn't turn him off from the group. Dan, presumably, I think the evidence is going to show, goes through the vetting. Presumably, whatever questions he was asked in the vetting process doesn't turn him off. Remember, the facts are going to show when he first joins, he's not a confidential human source for the FBI. Now, at some point, after only being in this chat for a few hours, he claims he sees information or text threats against law enforcement that make him so concerned. He calls a friend who's a police officer. That person comes, presumably looks at what he sees, contacts the FBI. The FBI, some time later, contacts Dan. There's this meet, okay? Now, granted, the government didn't show the screenshots from Dan's phone in their opening, but I presume we're going to see the screenshots from Dan's phone that they were able to get. And I'm sorry, not screenshots. They took pictures of what was on the phone. We're going to see that. You're going to decide whether or not those are actually threats and whether or not those are alarming. But what you are going to learn factually is that this Wolverine Watchman wire chat was broken up into groups. There was a main chat. Mr. Musical was in the main chat. This is why the trial is going to be very long, okay? We're going to start on my cross-examination with March. We're going to go through what was talked about in that chat, whether or not he made any threats to law enforcement, politicians, or to the government. And I promise you, we're going to do it as relevant and quickly as possible as I can. We're going to go through April, May, June, July, August, September, all the way to October, and do the same thing. There was also a vetting chat. That's the chat that we talked about where new members went to be interviewed for the Wolverine Watchman training. We're going to go through the vetting chat for every month, every person vetted, to see if Mr. Musical was ever in the vetting chat and if he ever vetted anybody. There was an armory chat. We're going to talk about what was discussed in the armory chat. We're going to talk about what Mr. Musical talked about in the armory chat and see if there were any threats to law enforcement, any threats to politicians, any threats, to the government. Or were these guys just in these chats, hanging out, talking about guns, and doing what guys do. You're gonna hear at a point, there is a Wolverine Watchman leadership chat. Now, at this point, well, sometime before this flashback, Dan is contacted by the FBI. And they speak, they give him some admonishments. He agrees to go back to the Wolverine Watchman training group as a confidential human source. At this point, he agrees to do this for free. Okay? But he winds up taking some time off work. He incurs some expenses. He gets reimbursed. And we're going to talk about some of those reimbursements. I think one is going to be key that you're going to hear about from all counsel is that he gets reimbursed for a laptop 2 weeks before the investigation ends. And he gets reimbursed for this laptop that costs $3,399.99. And you're going to have to decide why he needed a $3,399 laptop and 99 cents 2 weeks before the takedown, before it was over. Now he goes back and there's some trainings. I think both sides will concede that there were trainings prior to Dan coming back and joining the group. And the government's not going to know what any of those trainings were. I'm going to stop you right there. We've heard the name Barry Croft. I think testimony will show Barry Croft, guy out in Delaware, representing himself, some sort of national contact, big shot. And we're going to see this trial if Barry Croft actually had any contacts. You're going to hear about Adam Fox, who's from Michigan. Adam Fox is a guy who wants to join the militia movement. He has no group. He's talking, and what winds up happening, I believe, the testimony will show, and it's important, but it's marginally relevant to what happens here, is that a confidential informant, Steve Robeson, gets connected with Barry Croft. Barry Croft and Adam Fox link up. There's this meeting in Ohio. Wolverine Watchmen do not go. Croft goes, Adam Fox goes, and the government's going to try and prove to you that somehow the Wolverine Watchmen were aware of what happened in the meeting that none of them were at. Barry Croft, who connects with Joe, tells Joe, hey, you and this guy, Adam Fox, have a lot in common. Adam Fox now been befriended by another asset of the FBI. He's supposed to be the head of this group, the Michigan 3 Percenters. The thing about that is, Michigan 3 Percenters was a Facebook page, and the Facebook page was set up by another asset of the FBI. So Adam Fox's group consists of him, I believe, undercover FBI agent, and a friend of his, and somebody else, Sean Fix, who's well, what he is doesn't really matter. So those are the 4 people in his group. The Wolverine Watchmen still training. They're still going to protest. The purpose of them going to protest, I believe the evidence will show, is that throughout the course of 2020, they were upset about some things. They spoke out. They talked about Breonna Taylor. They talked about Oscar Grant. They talked about Robert Finnegan. They talked about what happened to George Floyd. They talked about and were upset with law enforcement about the unarmed or believed to be unjustified killings of people, African American, Hispanic, and white, at the hands of police. They're also watching, and another chat, 2 other chats come up, the protest chat and the comms communication live feed chat. And what they're doing, these chats, they're listening to the protests that are occurring nightly all across the nation. And they're commenting on these things. and they are seeing what is happening. They are seeing the protests. They are seeing what is happening in Portland. They talk about Seattle, referencing a portion of the city being, I guess, seized and being declared an autonomous zone for a period of time. They're talking about, and they see police stations being abandoned during these protests. That is what motivates them, I think the evidence will show, to do more urban style training. Now, obviously, we believe the training to be defensive. We believe to you that testimony is going to show the training was defensive. We believe the testimony will show that other people described the testimony as defensive. But one common thing you're going to see in this case is that things that were lawful, the government is going to ask you to hold against Mr. Musical. So they go to Black Lives Matter protests, and they go as a QRF. Now, this QRF had its own chat. Mr. Musical was not in the QRF chat. He was not in the QRF. The QRF goes down to Detroit. You've heard the recording that was made. Somebody allegedly makes the statement, if police start shooting civilians, I'm shooting the police. We believe that that statement is defensive. There's nothing wrong with it. I don't even think in the opening, the prosecutor said that that statement was illegal. What he said was, they want to police the police. Good. They then go to a Black Lives Matter rally in Lake Orion. Same thing. They're watching, making sure people are treated fairly. Police the police. They never take any action. That's the important thing. And I think when you hear the testimony, and we're going to ask you to count, and we're going to talk about this when it's time to do closings, that this group that supposedly hated the police, that was training, prepping, ready, geeked up to bang it out with law enforcement, came into contact with law enforcement over 10 times, and absolutely nothing happened but yelling and picture taking. They go to a barbershop protest in Lansing. So I guess we're not going to hear from any state troopers that were at the barbershop protest, but they were there. Remember, I think it was a barber at Owasso that wasn't going to follow shutdown orders, and all the barbers in support went up there and they were cutting hair. Police were there, watching me. They didn't even talk about this. I'm gonna bring it up. A lot of tough talk about what they were going to do at this barbershop protest. They get there, they protest, they yell, state police hand out tickets, no confrontation with them in law enforcement at all. There's a rally in April, early April, the Capitol. They go, they take pictures, they stack up on the doors, they yell, they scream, they go home. Testimony's going to show that they go back. There's another protest. And then we heard a lot about January 6th in the jury selection process. But no. The whole world knew they was coming back when they went back the second time, right? It had happened once. You had CNN was there, Wall Street Journal was there, there was all these news agencies there, state police were there, they were there in full kits, legally possessing weapons, marching, yelling, protests. They're allowed into the Capitol. They go in, they yell, they protest, they take some pictures, and then they go home. Now, the government has indicated that that was a recruitment tactic. I guess now we're going to see who did they actually recruit from the Capitol. Who did they actually recruit from any of these protests? Yeah, people saw them. They became more visible and they wanted to join, but that was after every event. See, I believe the testimony in the case will bear out that the government wants you to believe that these guys could not have possibly had any sincere motive to care about Black Lives Matter. They couldn't have possibly had any sincere motive to care about the Owasso Bar. They couldn't have possibly had any sincere concerns about Second Amendment rights and want to protest. And we talked about this. Often protests aren't polite. That's why it's a protest. And the testimony will be, there's nothing wrong with that. Again, they don't like it. I think it was even referred to as dangerous. It was lawful. It was their right. They complied with everything the government said they had to comply with to engage in that activity. So now, Wolverine Watchmen blow up. They lit. Whether or not they were clout chasing when they went, it pays off. They're going to do some trainings. And you're going to hear about them trying to purge, some group members who are hanging around talking about stuff in the chat, but not showing up at the trainings. The testimony will be that Mr. Musical wasn't involved in that. You heard first video, it was an audio clip from June. Because now the connection between the Wolverine Watchman, Adam Fox has been made. And I think the testimony is going to be via text message that we now know that connection was encouraged from the handling agents of Dan. Okay, at this point, he's talking to Joe, Dan is talking to Joe, Dan is talking to Adam, trying to bring them together. And a Facebook message is sent, well, I'm sorry, not on Facebook. A recorded message is sent through Facebook DM, was not played for you in opening statement. So I'm not going to ruin it for you. I'm sure it's going to be played in the trial. They don't play it, I surely will. And that Facebook message is what prompts the conversations and recordings you heard in people's opening statement. Now we know why there was so much talk in the voir dire process about, well, if they want you to play something or hear something, they can play it, right? Because I see they're not going to play the whole thing. So I think the testimony is going to be that the entire conversation on that first recording, the one in which Mr. Musical is heard saying, this meeting is pertaining to kicking the bull off, right? I think the entire conversation as transcribed will be, and again, the transcription is not the evidence, the recording is. I'll tell you that. Listen to the entire recording. I think the entire conversation is, Dan, I'm down for going. Pete, huh? Dan, I'm down for going. Pete, are you? Yeah, I am going. Well, I'm off from work for it. I will put that. Pete, okay. Dan, well, I'm committed to it. Just because like Joe wanted to go to the one in Ohio and we be like for 0 for 2. What's that for? Pete, what's that for? That was to the meeting or Dan, yeah, Pete, okay. Dan, because I'm assuming this meeting is pertaining to what? What went down in Ohio? Pete, this meeting is pertaining to kicking off the bull. Oh, really? Yeah, that's the point. I'm gonna let you know right now. This ain't about fucking let's get prepped and ready to go. This is about pointing rifles at fucking police officers and fucking politicians and squeezing the fucking trigger. Damn, oh shit. Pete, yeah, this ain't no joke. This is Fallujah. This is starting Fallujah in the United States. Dan, right. Pete, that's what he's talking about. Dan, Adam is one to push that. Pete, yeah, it's what he's been talking about. He's listening to his message. Dan, yeah. Pete, his message is listen, you fucking pussies, quit running your mouth, quit running your fucking dick suckers, and let's do something. Dan, right, shit. I'd like to see what he's about. Now, as we indicated, puts that first statement that they played for you in a completely different context, right? Dan, the testimony will show, says he's down for going. Pete says, huh? He reiterates it. I'm interested. Are you? Now you're going to have to decide once you hear the entire recording and assume the judge is going to enter into evidence, what was Pete's motivation in making that statement? Was he warning Dan? Like, this ain't something you want to go be a part of, right? And I think the testimony will show Pete never said he wanted to go. And the testimony would be Pete didn't go, right? So when it's time for me to argue my opinion that I hope you agree with, I'll do it at that time as to what that message in its totality actually meant. You heard another recording. I think the testimony evidence will be that the recording in its completeness says, and this is when Musical, Pete is talking to his son-in-law, Joe. Pete, well, Musical, but I mean, point blank, that's what he's down for, you know. Morrison, Adam, Musical, yeah. Morrison, yeah, you talk to him more than I do. Musical, do you know what he's down for? Morrison, yeah, fucking kicking it off. Musical, yeah, straight out, kicking that shit off. I know. Okay. Well, Morrison says, I know. Pete says, okay. Morrison says, I'm not stupid. That's why I said, no shit. Shit. I'm gonna stop right there. I'm gonna read the entire thing. Okay. Now, as you see, the testimony and evidence will show Pete says, yeah, straight out, kicking that shit off. Morrison says, I don't. Pete says, okay. Morrison says, I'm not stupid. That's why I said it's no shit. Pete doesn't call his son-in-law stupid, right? The evidence won't be that this was video recorded. So you can't see the facial expressions. So again, we're going to get the entire fact in the evidence. And when it's time for me to argue my opinion, we're going to talk about whether or not father-in-law must have been giving his son-in-law some look that made him say that I ain't stupid, right? The complete and finishing the transcript. Hey, Aunt Jada wants you. Go see Aunt Jada. Aunt Jada's calling you. It's Pete. Dan, that's what Ohio was pertaining. Pete, yeah. Dan, are we coordinating with some other states too for it? Or Morrison, that's the nationals. It took a national thing to get it going. Dan, I mean, it's going to be like a domino effect. Are we going to say no shit on this day? Morrison, this day, this time. Musical, this day, this time. Then Morrison says this day, this time, and it'll all be simultaneous. So that's them explaining the context of the message that Adam Fox submits to them. I think the testimony will be, and the evidence will be, that after this conversation, Joe doesn't go to meet Adam. Neither does Pete. We're going to talk about what happens after this point. I think the testimony is going to be that Dan vouches for Adam Fox. Before phone calls to the wife and all that, he vouches for him. I think the testimony is going to be there's a discussion about associating with Adam Fox, and the decision is no. Dan then begins to vouch for Adam Fox, and the decision is changed. Now, why is this important? Because the testimony won't be that only, the testimony will be that yes, Dan was initially voted leader of the Woodland Watchmen. He told them, no, I don't want to be the leader. I don't have a big enough social media presence. I'll be XO. Real reason couldn't be the leader was because it's a confidential human source, right? That would be pretty damn bad if he's the leader of the Wolverine Watchmen training group. But the testimony will also be that Dan had a nickname. And it wasn't just Big Dan. He was also called Dad because of his age and the respect that they had for him. So when Big Dan, dad, the guy who showed up at one training, and they were so impressed, he was immediately put into a leadership position, is now saying, no, this guy's cool. We can do this, we can do that, we can make assurances, let him come, the decisions change. Someone's gonna be that there was talk about putting a black bag over the head of Adam Fox. So he didn't know where Joe Morrison lived and where Pete lived. That wasn't done. As a matter of fact, I think testimony is going to be that Dan was asked by one of his handling agents if Adam was black bagged. I think the phrase is as he had planned. And I think the message is going to be a he, meaning Dan. So that's in June. Adam still isn't invited to the Munich location. A decision is made to meet Adam at another rally at the Capitol. So you're going to hear that there were multiple things going on at this rally. The Wolverine Watchmen are there inside the Capitol protesting. Adam Fox is there, and they talk. Okay. They hear from Adam Fox, hear what he has to say. They leave. Adam Fox leaves. Adam Fox puts out the invitation for people to go and meet with him in Grand Rapids. Now, we have to pay attention to what the evidence and testimony is. Pete Musico doesn't order anybody to go. People choose to go. They go. As Brother Counsel, Mr. Patrick already told you, they hear what he says. They see the marijuana smoke, but that's not what all they see. They see that this guy is claiming to be the leader of the Michigan 3 Percenters, lives in the basement of the vacuum shack in which he works, that doesn't even have a bathroom. He presumably was going next door to a restaurant to pee because his girlfriend put him out. He bounces back to his girlfriend's house to the basement of the vac shack when he's in trouble. So this guy literally didn't have a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out. And they see this. And so and that just gives you more context than what Mr. Kirkpatrick tells you. And I think he's correct. The evidence will show his client walks out to, this guy's crazy. There was a whole lot more reasons for his client to say that than with Mr. Patrick. I may have ruined it for Mr. Kirkpatrick, and I'm sorry for that. But there was a whole lot more reasons for his client to say that than that. That's why paying attention to the communications between Dan and Joe and Dan's FBI handlers and him via text message is important when we talk about what happened in Munich on this June 20th day. Now, you are going to have to determine whether, and I don't even think the government is going to argue about money or bullets or anything else. I think we're going to be talking about facilities and training, right? You're going to have to decide beyond a reasonable doubt if the facility that Mr. Morrison had was material beyond a reasonable doubt. I think the evidence is going to show you it was not. First of all, I think the evidence is going to show that the training that they knew how to do sucked. This guy had no military or combat experience whatsoever. Yes, the group had a definition of a FUD. FUDs weren't hunters. FUDs were Elmer Fuds, people who owned guns and didn't know what to do with them. The testimony will be Adam Fox called him a FUD. Joe Morrison didn't have any unique combat training. He was in the Marines. He was a heavy machine operator. Paul was a medic. They taped out the little areas. That's why Dan was so valuable, because he had what they were missing. Everybody knows that. The government knows that. That's why he made the perfect confidential human source. He was somebody that they looked up to, that they wish that they could be what he was purporting to be, and he fell in their lap. right? What you have to determine is whether or not what he showed them was really what they made it out to be. Or if, you got a law enforcement agency with unlimited resources and say, hey, let's look at this and see where this goes, right? I think the evidence will show you that the facility, unit owned by Joe, where Pete reside, what material, they had other places to train. Fowlerville, you can hear about that. Luther, hear about that. You're gonna hear about Cambria, Wisconsin, where he went to go train. You're also going to hear, I think the testimony is going to show that the area that they had wasn't really big enough to do these car maneuvers, that the backstop was basically trash, and it wasn't that organized. You're going to hear that Paul, Joe, had an argument, and they fell out this June 20th training. Paul leaves very early on, and so he's not even there. And in July, these chat groups that we talked about were still going on. There's now a new chat group. Paul has his own. People have been coming to Paul about complaints about Pete and Joe. Complained that the facilities weren't adequate for training. Complained Joe's wife and him are arguing. They're yelling. She's telling him to come get the kids, and they're sick of the drama from them all arguing. And they start looking for other places to train. This is in July. There's the other chat groups that start around July. You're gonna have what's called the bonfire chat. Mr. Musical was not in the bonfire chat. There were code words in the bonfire chat, but we got a list of the testimony to see if those code words were ever even used. I think the testimony will be that the one time a code word was used, bonfire, that they actually had a bonfire. The code bonfire was code for training, right? And s'mores was code for the equipment and all that they had to bring. When you see the term bonfire, they actually had a bonfire. And you're going to hear the government talk about this meeting that Paul had. The meeting was at his house. And as Mr. Kirkpatrick eloquently put out, Adam Fox wasn't there. You're going to hear that there's also a fuck around found out chat that was created. FAFO. Mr. Musical was not in that chat. Other people were. That chat, there's another chat, Brick Squad, which they took from Music, a rapper, Waka Flocka Flame, was another chat that Pete Musical was not in. And at some point, there was a chat called The Council and The Boys. Pete Musical wasn't in any of these chats. As a matter of fact, at some point, these chats even moved off the Wire app to another app called Threema. Is how I believe it's pronounced. But wasn't invited. And we're going to go through some of those messages as well. And you're going to see the complaints that they had about Pete. And they called him Crazy Pete. And they talked about the crazy stuff that he was said. You're going to hear that Dan, very early on, told his handlers, Scott Pete Musical is saying crazy stuff to invoke a response from law enforcement, right? When the first thing he does is he claims that he once firebombed a state trooper's house with a Molotov cocktail, waited for the trooper to come out so he can shoot him, but changed his mind. This is 2 years ago. There will be no evidence that they will be presented that that was actually true. You're going to hear that he talks about having his home booby trapped in C4 from 2 years ago. There'll be no evidence that he actually had C4. That when the police went and executed the search warrants, were no booby traps. He was known to say crazy and ridiculous stuff. That when they have the second training at Munich, when Adam Fox comes, we're going to talk and we're going to go through all these messages. We're going to determine whether or not there was any conversation of actually hurting police officers and any plan that they were preparing for? Was there any conversation about actually attempting to train to kidnap any politician? That's why, the talk that you hear is important, and the actions that they took behind it is important. And when Adam Fox comes to this August 2nd training, what does he actually do? What is actually done that is material support for any plan that Pete Musical knows Adam Fox has, that is material to what Adam Fox is trying to do? I think that Mr. Ballard, eloquently put it to you, just as the Attorney General's argued, there were probably thousands of hours of recordings in this case. But the recording, the key fob that they were using on the day that they even told you was the first most important day in this case, wasn't working, didn't capture it. Adam Fox, when they talking about the plan, when they supposedly go from this training group to this terror training cell, there's no key fob number. August 2nd, Adam Fox comes. They tell you August 9th he comes. Testimony will be that Mr. Musical wasn't there on August 9th. And we're going to talk about what was said about those trainings from Adam Fox. That when talking to Dan, said, I've never even seen Pete and Joe move with a gun. So when Dan tells you, if he tries to tell you that on those days, Pete and Joe were running around training with Adam Fox, we're going to ask him, so why did this come up in your conversation that you had with Adam Fox, if you're telling the truth about that? So we've also seen some videos of some shootings. And that surprised me because I believe those videos were in Wisconsin. Those videos depict Dan Harris, Brandon Caserta, and Ty Garber. So I guess at some point, I guess we're gonna be talking about them. They showed the video. Our clients weren't there. Mr. Musical wasn't there. Mr. Musical didn't go. There's no evidence that he ordered that training. As a matter of fact, I think might be able to show that some other confidential human sources had something to do with setting up that training and were there. There may have been, I think maybe 3 assets of the FBI there, and I don't even think Mr. Musical's name was even brought up. Now we get to the recording that you heard, the first recording that they played that was actually from a phone call in September. The day before that phone call, Dan has a communication with his handler. He is told, one second, John.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes, sir.
How much longer is your?
5 minutes.
Just check if it's gonna be a half hour break, but.
No, he receives a text message from his handler, and he's told, and I think the evidence will be, quote, yeah, I like that. Maybe tee it up with Pete also and treat him like the leader he claims to be. Seems like Joe is copying what Pete says now. What FBI handler texts Dan the day before the phone call they just played. Leave the key word in that quote, treat claims. Treat him like the leader he claims to be. So when they get up there and tell you that Mr. Musical was a leader, why would the handling agent say, treat him as he claims to be? And I'm sure they're gonna have some good answer for that now that they've heard it when he testifies, but you get to determine what he meant back on September 4th when he sent that message. And if Mr. Musical was a leader, if Mr. Musical was material. If his position in the gang, if it was a gang, and I submit to you it was a training group, was material in training somebody that he should have known beyond a reasonable doubt was going to take that training and commit a terrorist attack. Okay, remember, when you hear this evidence, we're going to be talking about what happened the past 2 years from in 2020. Investigation starts, I believe, in April 2020 and ends in October of 2020. But these people been talking tough on the internet since 2017, some of them. So they know as they meet these people, they've been talking this for a long time, hadn't done anything. Yes, you'll see some AR-15s. AR-15s are a designer gun, similar to Jordan gym shoes or Gucci purses, right? You don't need them, but it kind of makes you feel good when you have them. Okay? They never point those weapons or fire those weapons at anybody. This case personifies Twitter fingers, not trigger fingers, to quote Drake. And because of that, I'm going to ask you to find Mr. Musical not guilty. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Well, it's been sitting for a while. Let's take about 10 minutes. The restroom, drink, pop, whatever. Come back and get you in the jury room.
Afternoon, Judge. We will call, Special Agent Henrik Impola. Thank you.
For the record, your name, spell your last name.
My name is Henrik Impola, Henrik, first name. Last name is Impola, Impeola.
Ready.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Counselor.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Tell us your name one more time.
Special Agent Henrik Impola.
Okay. And do you go by any other names? Anyone call you anything different?
Yes, I also go by Hank.
Okay. How are you employed, sir?
I'm a special agent with the FBI out of the Flint Resident Agency.
Okay, we'll get into that in a second. How long have you been an FBI agent?
Since 2010, so this is my 13th year on the job.
Okay, you said that you were employed at the Flint Resident Agency of the FBI. What does that mean?
It's a satellite office out of Flint, so we've got 10 agents, and it's under the Detroit division. So our lead office in Michigan is out of Detroit, and then the smaller satellite office for the FBI is located in downtown Flint.
And in Flint, as an FBI agent in that office, what are some of your duties there?
So I'm a case agent, so I investigate threats that come into the Flint office. So I've investigated international terrorism, domestic terrorism. I was on a sex trafficking task force for about 5 years. Flint's a small town, so there's a lot of violent crime. That's the primary responsibility of FBI agents in Flint, is to help out with violent crime. So you end up helping out Michigan State Police troopers, Flint police officers, county sheriffs on gang investigations, homicides, basically anything that comes into the county that needs assistance.
Okay, and you mentioned some other types of work. You said you've worked on terrorism cases, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and have you served in other roles throughout the FBI?
Yes, so I'm a member of the FBI evidence response team. So that's an ancillary role, or it's an extra role that you do in addition to your normal duty. I started that in 2011, and then for 5 years, I was a member of the FBI SWAT team. I was a medic on the SWAT team. I wasn't an operator. And so those are the additional duties I have.
Okay, so you mentioned that you work terrorism cases, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
So counterterrorism, is that right?
Yeah, so in the FBI, we have a counterterrorism division, and that's been my primary focus since I got into the FBI.
So what is counterterrorism, if you can explain it to the jury?
So counterterrorism includes both international terrorism and domestic terrorism. And the concept is we are trying to identify terrorism plots and stop them before they happen.
You also mentioned a number of other kinds of investigations you've been involved with. You said gangs. What's your experience there?
Well, I was involved in a sex trafficking task force, and that frequently involved recovering victims and investigating subjects who were members of gangs. So Flint has a large gang problem, and I frequently had gang, drug, weapon investigations. And those investigations were secondary to terrorism. Terrorism was always my primary focus. So if there's a terrorism case, I had to drop it and work on that. And then if there wasn't an active terrorism threat, I was working on gang investigations or sex trafficking investigations.
You said you've been with the FBI since 2010, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And before that, did you have any other kind of profession?
Yes, I was a mechanical engineer. I worked in construction.
And did you have any special training or experience to do that kind of a job?
Yes, so I went to college for mechanical engineering in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, UP. And then I worked in that field for about 4 years as a project manager on commercial construction job sites.
Okay, so you have a bachelor's in engineering, is that right?
That's correct.
And you are the lead case agent of this investigation, is that correct?
Yes.
Tell me what that means, being a lead case agent.
It's the equivalent to being an officer in charge, or an OIC, as they typically call it in state court. So that means I'm the primary case agent for the Wolverine Watchman terrorism enterprise investigation. So that's the investigation into the group as a whole.
Now, you do have some special training, and you've told us about your experience, special training in domestic terrorism, those kinds of cases.
Yes, definitely. I've had continuing education in the FBI through the FBI Counter-Terrorism program since I joined the FBI.
So can you tell me and identify for me, what is the Wolverine Watchman?
Sure. So the Wolverine Watchman is a self-styled anarchist militia that trains, participates in paramilitary training for the purpose of furthering political violence.
Did you open an investigation into any members of the Wolverine Watchman in March of 2020?
Yes, I did.
Why did you do that?
I received information from a citizen who came into the FBI Flint office and provided information about the group as a whole and then about these three particular defendants.
Had you heard of the Wolverine Watchman before that date?
No,
And had you heard of any of these three defendants before that date?
no, I never heard their names before.
What does it mean to like open an investigation?
Well, it means that the FBI provides the threat, the violation of law, and the risk to public safety or national security. And then we submit that to our management. There's a chain of supervisors and legal counsel that will review it. And then once the case is opened, that allows us to use our investigative tools to investigate whoever the subject of that case is.
And so did you work on this case alone or with other agents?
So I worked with multiple other agents and officers in this investigation. So there was individual cases on Pete Musico and Joe Morrison and Paul Bellar. And so Adam Harris here, he's a special agent who was responsible individually for the Paul Bellar investigation. And then Todd Reinick, another agent that I work with, was responsible individually for the Joe Morrison and Pete Musico investigation. Brian Russell was the Michigan State Police Detective Sergeant, who was the officer in charge for the state. You're working with jointly. And then Special Agent Jason Chambers was my partner. He was a handling agent for Dan. And we were both case agents for the overall Wolverine Watchman terrorism enterprise case.
Okay. Do you see Brian Russell in the courtroom today?
Yes, he's seated right over there.
Okay. And so he is actually not with your agency. He's not with the FBI, correct?
That's correct. He works for the Michigan State Police.
Okay. And so what was his role and function in this investigation?
So he was the OIC, or officer in charge. So we were liaisoning with Brian Russell for all the threats to any politicians out of Lansing, for threats to the governor, and for any violations of state law.
So you mentioned before a terrorism enterprise investigation. What can you tell me? What does that mean?
So that's an investigation on the group as a whole. So we typically can't investigate a group as a whole, like a militia. We wouldn't be able to investigate that militia because that would be infringing on their right to assemble and speak freely. So the only way we can investigate the group as a whole, just for somebody being a member of that group, is if that group itself is designated for political violence. So in this case, after we opened initial investigations on these three defendants and we started to gather information on the case, we later opened a group investigation on the Wolverine Watchmen after we determined that the group itself was dedicated for political violence.
When you say political violence, what do you mean by that?
I mean, targeting law enforcement officials and politicians to threaten them and potentially harm them.
And when you say that these three individuals became case subjects, what is a case subject?
So the case subject is the person who's individually being investigated. So for instance, Agent Harris here is responsible for the individual investigation on Paul Bellar. So he is digging into all the details, anything specific and pertinent to Paul Bellar. And then I'm the case agent over the Wolverine Watchman investigation as a whole. So I would coordinate with Agent Harris for the overall investigation. He would coordinate with me for any individual violations of law or threat that Paul Bellar would pose.
Okay, and so when did they get opened as case subjects?
It was right at the end of March in 2020. As soon as we received information from CJS Dan coming into the FBI office, we opened individual cases on these three defendants.
And did you become familiar with their appearance, their voice, what they looked like throughout the course of this investigation?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and for the record, can you please identify the three defendants that you're talking about?
Sure. Starting right to left. So seated right here with the glasses and the white shirt and the tie, that's Paul Bellar. And then the middle subject with the blue tie and the gray shirt and the beard, that's Joe Morrison. And then on the far left over here with the gray shirt, gray tie, and the glasses, that's Pete Musica.
Thank you. Witness identify the defendants for the record.
Also reflect.
Thank you. All right. So how did you become familiar with them? Give us sort of a thumbnail sketch of how you became familiar with their appearance, their names, things like that.
Well, we had physical surveillance. We had recordings. Dan performed multiple consensual recordings, and he would provide the recordings to me. And then I would debrief Dan, go through, and he would be able to explain who made the statements and then who did the action that we were able to see and hear. So after talking with Dan and then looking at other publicly available things like Facebook, driver's license photos, I was able to determine who the defendants were as they were performing the actions throughout the case.
Through the course of this investigation, did you come to recognize their voices?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And are we talking about, as counsel has said, thousands of hours of recordings or what?
Oh, I believe there's about between 150 and 300 hours of recordings.
Okay. We're not talking about thousands. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Adrian, I'm going to shift gears here a little bit. Can you tell me what the Boogaloo is?
Sure. The Boogaloo, it's a reference to a civil war, an imminent civil war in the United States,
Fought by who?
fought by citizens against the government.
And how do you know what it is? It's something like, you know, before this case, did you have training and experience in domestic terrorism? You told us about that, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So it's a concept that's used by domestic extremist groups for a while. It's a concept that's been out there, but it took off in 2019, 2020 online and became much more popular and spread around the internet.
Okay. And did these defendants, were they aligned with that movement?
Yes, they were.
And how do you know that?
Well, primarily through what they said and what they posted. They were frequently posting Boogaloo propaganda, describing the Boogaloo. They were recruiting for the Boogaloo, and they talked about it incessantly.
And so there's been a lot of references here to a confidential informant or a confidential human source. Can you tell us what a confidential human source is?
Yes. So a confidential human source is the FBI's acronym for a CI, or a confidential informant. So it's somebody who isn't an employee of the FBI. It's a civilian. And that person is reporting information to the FBI. And so their identity is kept secret. They're assigned a code number and a code name, and then a handling agent or two handling agents are assigned to task and debrief the source, and then document those debriefings and taskings in reports.
Okay. And so what was the first name of the source that you had involved in this case?
That was Dan.
Right. And did you know him before when was your first contact with him? Let me start there.
That was March 17th, 2020.
Did you know him for that date, March 17th, 2020?
No, I didn't.
How did he come to your attention?
He was referred to our office by a Mount Morris Township police officer who was one of his friends. That Mount Morris Mount Morris Township police officer referred him to a detective sergeant from Mount Morris Township who was on our Safe Streets Violent Gang Task Force. And that's located in the Flint office. It's an FBI-led task force, and I frequently work with members of the task force. So when it was referred to the Violent Gang Task Force, that detective sergeant came to me and said, "This is something you should look at."
So that information was referred to you.
That's correct.
Okay, it made its way kind of to you through a couple different individuals. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And what was the nature of the complaint, the information you received?
Well, the initial information was that there's a group out there that was.
Actually, here's the,
It's not up for the truth judge. It's to see why he did what he did next.
That's not an exception. I know that she can quote a rule to back that, fine. But if that's her position, that it's not necessarily true, then it's irrelevant. You can just say what he did next.
Any response?
Judge, I have to set the stage for why he's doing what he's doing next, which is why I said it's not offered for the truth of the matter asserted. So it's not.
Overruled, keep going.
What is the information you received?
Information I received is that there's a group located out of, let me step back. At that time, I didn't know where they were located. The information I received was that there was a group that was looking to do reverse red flags on search warrants on law enforcement officers' homes in retaliation for red flag laws and search warrants and police violence.
Okay, so you said a bunch of like law enforcement terms there. I want to break them down for a second, okay? What's a reverse red flag?
Well, in this case, a reverse red flag is it's hitting an officer's house in retaliation for red flag laws or red flag warrants.
What are red flag laws or red flag warrants?
So red flag laws and red flag warrants, they don't exist in the state of Michigan, but other states such as, I believe, California, have laws that allow the state to take away people's firearms based on conditions set forth by the state, such as your mental status, threatening to hurt yourself, things like that.
Okay, and so when you say red flag laws, that's what you mean. And then when you say reverse red flag laws, what does that mean?
Well, that's a reference to retaliation for red flag laws. So if an officer was going out and an officer had like made an arrest that was for was deemed to be for a red flag purpose, they would hit that officer's house in retaliation for that arrest.
Legal, not legal.
Definitely not legal.
Okay. What is an encrypted chat? You can explain that to us.
Sure. Encrypted chat, it's a text messaging or social media messaging application that you can download on your phone through like the Google Play Store. And it allows you to communicate with somebody, and only the two people communicating or on a group chat can read what's going on. So in other words, law enforcement can't send a search warrant to the phone provider because technologically we can't get the information in between the two phones.
All right, we'll go into that in a bit, and I have some exhibits to show you about that. But let's get back to Dan. Dan was conveying information to somebody who then conveyed it to you. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you met with him for the first time, you said on March 17th?
Yes,
Okay, and what was the purpose of meeting with him?
to get the information, to source it and determine what nature of a threat it was.
Okay, and after you met with him and you looked at the information he provided you, you heard the information he provided you as well?
Yes,
Okay, and did you ask him for something after that?
yes.
Tell me about what you did and why.
We asked for consent to review his cell phone because we wanted to verify what he was saying was true and see ourselves the nature of the messages so that we could make our own determination on how threatening they were.
Okay, and did you review those messages?
Yes, I did.
Were they concerning?
Yes, they were.
What was your concern?
My concern was there was already a group that was organized in place that was using a secure means to talk about explosives and machine guns.
Okay. And did you ask him to do something as a result of reviewing his information?
Yes, I asked to take pictures of his phone and document the chats.
Okay, and did you do that?
Yes, I did.
And he allowed you to just have his phone and look through it?
Yes, he said we could look through whatever we needed. I told him I would need to confirm his messages and that I had a trust but verify policy. So I wanted to see things for myself. And he was fine with that. He said we could look through his entire phone.
Okay. He come to you to give you this information and ask you if he could be a confidential informant?
No, he didn't.
So what did he do?
So he came to us, he allowed us to review his phone, and he told us how he'd gotten into the group and what was going on through the encrypted wire chats. And then he got up to leave.
Okay, and did you ask him to stay and talk with you some more about this or meet with you again?
Yes, I did.
Tell me about that.
Well, I told him that he had unique placement and access into the group and that this was very concerning. And I told him that I'd like for him to continue to help us out and that we would explain to him the process. I told him on the first time we met him that we have a process for protecting people, giving them a code name and an identity, that ultimately I wanted him to be a confidential human source, have those protections because I wanted to keep going and I wanted to open up an investigation, and he had unique access that I didn't think I would be able to get in any other way.
What do you mean by that? When you say unique access, what does that mean?
That means he was a member of the group, and it was a close-knit group that was communicating on encrypted communications. So we didn't have anybody who would be able to provide information about the group, and there'd be no way for me to get information through a search warrant.
Okay.
So
And did you ask him to be a confidential informant, confidential human source?
yes, I did.
Okay, and did you have to vet him, look into him to see, various things about his background before you signed him up, so to speak?
Yes, I did. We've got a standard procedure in the FBI. There's quite a bit of paperwork involved. We had to run his criminal history. I had to do what we call open source checks. I had to run his name through our systems. And then I had to admonish him. We've got a standard series of admonishments we give to the sources so that we're all on the same page with what they're allowed to do and how they're allowed to proceed with us.
Okay, so you said you ran a criminal history on him, right?
Correct.
What was the result of that?
He had no criminal history.
Okay, and did you look into his employment?
I did.
Tell me about that.
He worked as a truck driver. He was a contractor for the US Postal Service. So he drove a regular route, delivering, not mail like a postal carrier, but delivering between large areas.
Okay, and did you look into his background, whether he had served in the military, anything like that?
Yes, I did.
Tell me about that.
I realized that he'd served in the Army. He'd been honorably discharged and that he'd been in combat and received some injuries as a result of that.
Why did you view him as a good person to ask to be a source?
Well, he already had access into the group. So placing somebody into a group like that is, without knowing how the group operates, is not only is it very risky, but it doesn't have a high probability of success. So Dan was already a member of the group, and so that access was important to us.
So you asked him to be a confidential human source. Did he ask for payment for this role?
No.
Ever during the course of this investigation ask you to get paid to do the work you were asking him for?
No, never asked me to get paid throughout the entire investigation.
Did you actually pay him?
Yes, I did.
Tell me about that and why.
During the investigation, I frequently tasked him to perform duties, go to trainings, travel across the United States, to Wisconsin. And so he was taking time off work. He was losing money. So I think there was about 15 weeks of work that he'd missed. He was paying for his own meals. He was using his own vehicle, paying for his own gas. He was using up his own ammunition, which is pretty expensive. And he was trying to maintain his role in the group all on his own expenses. So I didn't think it was fair, and I didn't think he'd be able to financially keep going, nor would he want to work for the FBI if it was a significant financial hardship. So I decided on my own that we needed to reimburse him and continue to pay him, even though he didn't ask.
Okay, and so tell me, before the arrests occurred in October of 2020, how much money did he get paid?
Been paid approximately $30,000 before the arrest in October.
Okay. What about after the arrests occurred? What was that sum?
There was another $24,000 that he was paid for relocation and to keep him safe.
And the length of this investigation ran how many months?
It was from March to October, so approximately 7 months.
Talk about what some of those expenses were that you were trying to either reimburse or pay for. Can you tell me about those?
Sure. One of them was a cell phone. He had an old phone and it would run out of batteries. And so we needed to have a clear line of communication. So we told him he had to get a new phone. And then part of the payment was to reimburse him for his phone. Another was a smartwatch. We realized throughout the investigation that the group was using operational security means so that their phones would be placed away. So if he was in danger, we needed a way to contact us and do that through the smartwatch, even if all cell phones were collected by the members of the group. Another was a laptop computer. During the investigation, especially leading up to the takedown, I was logged into his Wire account, and Wire tells individuals how many devices and what type of device is logged in. So Dan received a laptop, which was the same laptop that I used. So, because anybody on the group could log into Wire and see what type of laptop was logged in, and if he didn't have one, that would have been significant. Also, leading up to the takedown, we had a lot of recordings for him to review. It was planned that he would testify. And so we wanted that he didn't have a computer. We wanted to make sure that he had a computer that he could use to prepare for trial.
We talked earlier about admonishments that you had to give him. What are admonishments?
So admonishments are basically legal language or requirements that the FBI has for the relationship between the source and the handler. So they put in writing, and we have to verify in writing that we've admonished the source so that the relationship is clear.
Is it fair to say that admonishments are equal to like rules you have to follow?
Yes, that's probably a better word.
Okay, so what sorts of rules, or can you describe some of the rules that you have to tell the source when you sign them?
Sure. So the first thing we have to tell them is that cooperation with the FBI is voluntary. In other words, they don't have to do it. They can tell us to leave at any time, and they have no obligation to help us. Second thing we tell them is that they're not an FBI agent. So they can't portray themselves as FBI agents. There is no get out of jail free card. They can't commit crimes on behalf of the FBI. They can't advise other police officers that they're working for the FBI. And that kind of leads up to the third one is it's a confidential relationship. So you're trying to keep it secret. We're not going to tell anybody, and anybody that they tell it's up to them. But for their own safety, I tell my sources not to tell anybody. We go a little more into detail as to illegal act. So there is approval process for illegal action. So if you're working as a source and some situation comes up which could cause you to have to break the law, you've got to advise me about it. And then I've got to go to attorneys. There's a process for that. And I told him that he wasn't proved to break the law, and that if that situation came up, he should tell me about it, and we would work through it with attorneys.
What were your initial instructions? Well, let me go back a second. You sign him up as a source. Do you give him any kind of training? Is there like a source school or something that you send people to?
No.
And what are the instructions to the source to go do? What are you asking the source to go do?
So the source is supposed to observe and report. It's supposed to be a listening post and then provide information to me as to what he sees.
Okay. Are you required to, so he goes, does something for the FBI. How do you get the information back about what he's gone and done?
Well, we debrief him. So after the source has been tasked by myself, then he would come back and he would report to me what he sees.
Okay, and then And then do you have to verify his reporting and make sure he's telling you accurate things?
Yes, so that'd be my job as a source handler or a case agent for the source is I would have to make sure that he's not lying, that he's reporting the situation accurately, and that anything else that he missed, I would task him to get that information the next time.
And what happens if the source if you are looking after and making sure what the source is telling you is true, if that source is not truthful to you, what do you do with that source?
So if the source is not truthful, you have to confront him about anything that's not truthful, document it. And if the source lies to you, then you have to close them. You can't operate a source that's not.
Did you corroborate Dan's reporting to you?
Yes, I did.
How do you do that?
Well, one of the key ways I did it was I provided him a recording device. And I tried to, once I started recording things, I recorded everything that I could capture. And then when I debriefed him, I would ask him about what I knew was to be on the recording device. And then later when I would listen to the recording device, I could see it, if his reporting was accurate, and I could verify what I heard to occur on the recording device versus what he reported to me.
And was it accurate?
Yes, it was.
Okay. And did he give you access to the communications of the group?
Yes, he did.
All right. You mentioned before this encrypted application, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you told us that encrypted application can't be accessed outside of the sender and the receiver of messages, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And so how did you monitor or review those communications in real time?
So I asked for Dan's username and password to the Wire application and to his Facebook. And then I logged into Facebook myself under his account. And I logged into Wire myself under his account. So then I was able to view those communications as they were happening real time on Dan's account as though I was Dan.
If you had access to Dan's account, did you ever type or reply as if you were him?
No, never.
Why didn't you pretend to be Dan since you had access to his account?
That would be too risky. Dan has to go out in real life and meet with these people. And if they thought he said something that he didn't actually say, that would be risky for Dan. And that would be a different type of undercover operation. And we knew Dan was going out into the field. So there's no way, I can't pretend to be Dan. I don't talk like him. I don't think like him. So the only way to do it and keep Dan safe is if Dan is the only one communicating.
Okay. Did you capture the communications in some manner?
Yes, I did.
Okay. So we've talked about the application, the application Wire. Is that right?
Yes,
Okay. That is an encrypted application. Is that correct?
yes.
Do messages stay on that encrypted application or do they self-delete?
So there's a setting you can put on Wire to make them self-delete. So in this case, they were set up to self-delete. So after you viewed them after a certain time period, and it was adjusted throughout the investigation, but it was typically 1 day before the message is self-deleted.
So how did you capture the communications?
So I had to log in daily, and then I had to copy everything manually into a chat log as it was occurring before it self-deleted.
When you say you would have to copy, is that like what I do with the document on my computer? I highlight and then I copy, paste it somewhere else?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and so how did you keep track of that?
So that information would be copied from the computer on Wire when I was logged in as Dan, and it would be copied into a Microsoft Word document. And then we keep a running log of all the chats that occurred monthly. And then when a new month started, we'd create a new Microsoft Word document for each month. If something pertinent or something concerning happened while we were reading the chat log, then we would do a screen capture or a screen grab of what we thought was important so that you could see exactly how it looked on Wire. Because when you do the running chat log, it doesn't look quite like it does on your phone. It's just, you're just copying it, whatever verbatim into Wire, and it looks like a Microsoft Word document.
Raw data, right?
Yes,
Versus screenshots of how you would actually see it on your phone. Is that right?
that's correct.
Okay, thank you. May I put a finer point on this? In the wire application, can you screenshot? Is that physically possible to screenshot chats or messages?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, what about if you attempt to screenshot, does it alert?
Yeah, I'm
anyone?
sorry, man, we approach.
Come on up. Continue.
Thank you, Judge. All right, we were just talking about how wire works. Do you recall those questions?
I do.
Okay, and you talked about settings on wire. If you try to screenshot, what happens, if anything?
Well, I never tried it because I wasn't willing to risk it. I wasn't sure and familiar with all the different settings. I know some of the social media apps will actually notify somebody if you screen capture, even if it does allow it. So I wasn't willing to try to screen capture, and I advised Dan not to do that as well.
And you asked Dan during the course of this investigation to do recordings, right?
Yes.
Okay. Tell me about the other ways that you monitored the communications of the group.
Well, I was logged in through Facebook. We logged in through Wire, and then we would monitor physically. We do physical surveillance as to what was going on.
Okay. Did you ever kind of, people call this in like on TV and stuff, ask him to wear a live transmitter or a wire, quote unquote?
Oh, yes. Yeah, so in addition to just recording for Dan's safety and for my knowledge as to what was going on, in addition to recording, he was actually transmitting the information to me. I was listening live in my office as the information was coming in.
Okay. And did you also gain familiarity with the profiles or handle names on the wire chats of the individuals involved in this case?
Yes, it took quite a bit to figure out who is who. So I didn't initially know, but that was part of the investigation. We had to figure out who was using what handle.
Okay. Did you attempt to record as many events as you could after a certain point?
Yeah, so once we started recording, I tried to record everything once Dan was there. So that's kind of a key point in which, you know, you don't want to miss something because you don't know when it'll be important later.
Is the testimony that you're giving here today the result of all of this sort of monitoring you did?
Yes, it is.
You You already told us the timeline of the investigation starts in March 2020 and goes till October 2020. Is that right?
That's correct.
Thank you. Did you ever do any records requests as a result of this investigation?
Yes. So during the investigation, I requested records from phone companies and then from social media companies.
And so when you request records from a social media company, do you just call and say, hey, I'm the FBI, give me your records?
No, I have to submit a preservation request to preserve the documents, and then later I submit a search warrant. So I go in front of the judge and I write an affidavit, and then if that judge finds there's probable cause, we submit that search warrant to the custodian of records. So in this case, it was Facebook. So the Facebook custodian of records and their legal team gets the search warrant, and then they have the opportunity to respond and provide the results.
And so the judge authorizes you to do that. Is that right?
That's correct.
Can you get records on wire? Meaning communication records on wire?
You can't get any content from wire.
How come?
Well, it's a company that's not located in the United States, so it's not, doesn't have to abide by US laws. But also because of the end-to-end encryption, it doesn't actually physically hold the content. It can't provide the content, even if it was in the United States.
So it can't store the it doesn't store the content, therefore you also can't get the content, even if they complied with US legal process, correct?
That's correct.
I gotta stop you. I need a clarification. I thought you indicated that the information was stored for like a day.
Yes, it is, but it's stored only on the cell phone. And so
Okay.
one wire, this is a little bit beyond my technological means,
Yeah.
but wire has essentially the encryption tool.
Yeah.
And when you download the app, it allows it decrypts it so that you can read it on your phone, but wire doesn't maintain the records.
And it doesn't allow you to do screenshots or anything like that.
That's correct.
Well,
Go ahead, Mr. Johnson.
no, I'll just wait for consternation.
Okay,
Can I continue?
yes, please.
Thank you. Did you do records requests in this case? I think I asked you that already.
Yes, I did.
Okay, and did you do records requests for records for the time Dan got in the group?
Yes.
Tell me about that generally.
So in this case, I went back, it was either 1 or 2 years, and I wanted to see how the Wolverine Watchman formed and what had happened before Dan was in the group. What kind of rules were set up, how the group was established. So I took the probable cause and the information I had about illegal activity, and then I asked for historical records from before the time that Dan had come in.
Okay. And did you prepare any sort of chart or guide to help understand your testimony throughout the course of this investigation?
Yes, I did.
Can you take a look at exhibit number 1, please?
I have it here.
Can you tell me what that is?
This is a timeline of significant events in the investigation.
Can you tell me how you made that timeline?
Sure. I went to the original source material and then I used that as a guide. So for instance, if I had a recording and I verified a training occurred on a particular day, I would note the date of the source material and I would document that in the timeline
Why'd you make this?
to aid in my testimony.
Did you use some kind of fancy software to do it?
Microsoft PowerPoint.
Okay. And is it fair and accurate as to the dates and events on that timeline?
Yes, it is.
I'm going to move for its admission, Judge.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
No, you're,
Okay, it's admitted. That'll be exhibit 1, correct?
Thank you. I'm not going to go through all of this with you at this point, but can I ask you to take a look at exhibit number 2, please?
Yes. Have it here.
Okay. And can you tell me what that is?
There are photographs of the subjects of the investigation.
And are they the photographs of all the subjects of the investigation?
No, it's just photographs of individuals who are pertinent to this case here today.
Okay. Did you make it?
Yes, I did.
Why'd you make it?
They aided my testimony.
Is it fair and accurate?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to move for its admission, Judge.
No objection.
No objection.
objection.
2 is admitted.
You could take that down. Ethan. number 2. Thank you. All right, so explain to us who's on this chart.
Sure. In the top left is Barry Croft. So he's a subject of investigation from the FBI Baltimore office, who lives in Delaware. In the top right is Adam Fox. So you guys have heard about him. He's from Grand Rapids. And then left to right in the middle row is Joe Morrison. In the middle row is Pete Musico. On the far right is Paul Bellar. So those are the founding members of the Wolverine Watchmen, as well as Ty Garvin on the lower right. He's also in Wolverine Watchmen leadership, and he's a founding member. In the middle, at the bottom, is Amanda Keller. Her real name is Rainey Amanda Keller. She's the fiance of Adam Fox. He participated in a lot of the same events that Adam Fox did. And then in the lower left is Caleb Franks. He's the screen name Red Hot, and he was a member of the Wolverine Watchmen who went on to be an operator for Adam Fox. And we've got CHS Dan, who I've been referring to. He's the icon that's not a picture on the lower right, and then Undercover Mark, who is an FBI undercover agent, and he showed up in Cambria, Wisconsin for the training event in Wisconsin.
You can take that down. Thank you. All right, so let's go back to how you were put in touch with Dan initially. Can you tell us the officers that put you in touch? The names of them, sorry.
Sure. So Detective Sergeant Brett Orvis, who was a task force officer on the FBI Violent Crime and Gang Task Force out of Flint. He's the one who contacted me and said, there's a guy that you should meet with. Brett Orvis received his information from Mount Morris Township Police Officer Dave Ramirez, who's a local police officer who's Dan's friend. He met with Dan and been concerned with what he saw.
Okay, and so you mentioned earlier that you had met with him first on March 17th. Is that right, of 2020?
That's correct.
Did you meet with him after that as well?
Yes, I met with him shortly thereafter on March 19th, and then frequently throughout the duration of the investigation.
And did he give you information about how he came upon this group?
Yes.
Did he give you information about how he joined it on Facebook?
Yes, he did.
Did he tell you that he was directed to this encrypted app wire?
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna ask you to take a look at exhibit number 16.
I have it here.
Can you tell me what that is?
Yes. This is a photograph of Dan's phone, a photograph of a Facebook direct message between Dan and Paul Bella.
And how did you see this?
I saw it on Dan's phone the first day I met him.
And why did you see it?
I'd asked for consent to search Dan's phone, and I wanted to verify what he was saying.
Okay, and when was the text message from?
It's from March 7th, 2020.
Okay, and is it fair and accurate as to what you saw on that day?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. I'm going to move for its admission.
Heard before June 14th. I have no objection.
What was the date of this text message?
This is March 7th. It's a Facebook direct message, March 7th, 2020.
Objections.
No, Your Honor.
And Judge, I should have done this earlier, but I have binders for the court as well, if the court wanted to see what
That
we're
would
seeing.
save me a whole lot of
Yeah,
time.
apologies, Judge. I should have dropped that off on your bench earlier.
Admitted.
And it has an index in there too, Judge, so you don't have to take all the notes in the world. Apologies.
I'm gonna get my exercise.
Index is the part.
Is there no, is that admitted, Judge? No objection?
Yes, it was.
Thank you. Can you put it up, agent? All right, so explain to us, please, what we're seeing here.
This is a photograph taken of CHS Dan's phone. Asked him to bring up how he got into the group, and I took a photograph the first time we met him, or we did, me and my partner.
And what does it say, Paul Zacharias? What is that?
So that's the alias that Paul Bellar used on Facebook. So that's his Facebook profile name.
Okay, and so what's going on here? What is he asking?
Dan, who's in the blue, said, read your post about the Wire app. When downloaded, how do we go about searching for users? I'm also interested in the training. I'm a firearms instructor, may have some tools to bring to the table. Paul Bellar responded, gotcha. Do you have the Wire app?
So this was the invitation to join the wire, is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. So if you can explain to me, like I've never seen wire before, how it's set up. So what does it do?
So Wire allows you to do text messaging, just like a text messaging application on your phone. So you can do individual text messages, you can do group text messages. It also allows you to do video calls, just like FaceTiming somebody or Skyping somebody. And it allows you to submit pictures or videos, just like you could through any text messaging application. So just like a text messaging application, you set up group text or you have individual texts. You would see them just like you clicked on your text messaging application on your phone.
Okay. Would you take a look at exhibits number 17 and 18? Yeah. Okay, and what are those?
So 17 is a screen capture by the FBI of the wire profile of the three defendants. And 18 is a photograph of Dan's phone with the wire chat groups that he was part of.
Okay, so regarding 17, those you said, were they fair and accurate? And as to what date were they fair and accurate?
Yes, they're fair and accurate as to the end of March of 2020.
Okay. And you said exhibit 18, when were those from?
This is from March 17th and March 19th of 2020.
Okay. Are these pictures that you took of Dan's phone?
The pictures me and my partner took the first time we met.
Thank you. Okay. And they are fair and accurate, is that correct?
Yes, they are.
For their admission, Judge?
Objections.
They occurred before June 14th. I have no objection.
No objection.
No objection.
17 and 18 are admitted.
Walk me through, if I'm new to the wire application and I, put in my information, what does it ask me? What happens when I sign up for the application?
You have a phone number, and once you have a phone number, you can register your wire profile, just like you're creating a Google account or an Apple account. And you can set up the notifications on your phone, and you can provide a profile picture if you want. You don't have to provide one, and you have to create a username and a password, and then a PIN, and then you have to provide, an account recovery device, such as left on your phone number or your email address. If you lose your password, so all the standard things you have to do to register an online profile.
Can you put up 17? Thank you. So what are we looking at here?
So these are the three defendants' profiles. These are screen captures that the FBI did when we were logged in under Dan's account, so we could see their profile pictures and their profile, how they had it registered. So left to right, Boogaloo Bunyan, that's the alias for Joe Morrison. That's Joe Morrison's profile pic. The middle, Doc 1776.2, that's Paul Bellar, that's his profile picture. And then on the right, Grandpa is Pete Musico, and that's his profile picture.
And then there's some things that are checked here. Group admin, what does that mean?
So that's the group administrator. So if you're the group administrator, that means you have the authority to control the chat. So you can add and remove other users. You can update any of the group settings or notifications, like for instance, the self-deleting option. And so basically you're in charge of that group text.
Can you put up 18, please, engineers? What are we looking at here?
So this is a photograph of Dan's phone from the first times that I met him. And we asked him to pull up wire and show us what the encrypted chats were. And then we took a photograph of his phone with the chats that Dan had been invited to that were already established on wire.
Okay, so we're looking at a bunch of different names here. What are these?
So the top, Wolverine Watchman, that's what we call the main chat. Everybody who's in the group is on the main chat. That's the Wolverine Watchman chat. The next chat is a meme chat where they can share memes. The next chat is an armory chat. So that's where they can discuss their weapon platforms. Then there's the combat medical chat. And then the vetting chat. So these are the different chat groups in which different members of the Wolverine Watchmen are invited into depending on their role in the group.
Was every single member a part of every single chat group?
Every member was a member of the main group, but no, they weren't a member of all the other groups. That was, up to your role and your participation in the group.
What's red grunt?
So Red Grunt is Dan's username.
Okay.
So when Dan is active on Wire, that's the username he chose and then gave us, and we logged in as Red Grunt.
What's the one under him?
That's Doc 1776.2. So that's Dan's friend. So if you friend somebody, meaning you like individually follow them, it'll show up on your profile who your individual friends are.
And who's that individual friend?
That's Paul Bellar.
Oh, thank you. Did you look through the chats on the date that you talked about, March 17th?
Yes, I did.
Okay, did you see anything that caused you concern?
Yes, I saw quite a number of things that caused me concern.
Okay, can you take a look at exhibits 19A through G?
So I have them here.
Do you recognize those?
I do.
What are those?
These are other photographs taken of Dan's phone. They're photographs taken by me and my partner the first day we met Dan.
Is it the first day or the first and second time you met him?
We took photographs the first day and the second day.
Okay. Is this all of the photographs you took?
No, this is a small portion of the photographs. We tried to take everything we could see.
Is that fair and accurate as to how you saw those things on those dates?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. I'm gonna move to their admission, Judge.
The objection.
No objection.
No, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
19A through, what was it?
G.
D is it?
Thank you, Judge. Could you put up 19A for me, please? Can you tell me what this is?
This is a meme talking about hip hops.
You put up 19B. This,
This is a schematic for an auto sear.
what's an auto sear?
An auto sear is a component to a rifle that can make it fully automatic, so it can be a machine gun.
Illegal in the state of Michigan.
It can be if it's not registered.
Could you put up 19C, please? What's this?
A photograph posted by Tito. It's a picture of the anarchist cookbook with household substitutes for making explosives.
Household substitutes like what for making explosives?
Household substitutes to use as components for a bomb.
Okay. And what kind of things are listed in there?
Things you, ammonia, bleaching powder, lime, things you'd have around the house, lye,
And who posted this?
years ago.
D, please? 19D.
This is from the Armory chat, and this is discussion of the blast radius of a bomb.
What is tannerite?
Tannerite is an explosive,
What is TNT?
it's another explosive.
E, please, 19E. Can you tell me what's happening here and who's involved in this chat?
Sure. So, Boogaloo Bunyan, Joe Morrison, Pete Musico are involved in this chat, and this is a demonstration of the ping feature and the location data feature.
What's a ping feature?
A ping feature, it's an icon that Wire has, which can notify all, it's like an alert, and it notifies all the users somebody has pinged. And it was used as a call for attention to get everybody on the chat's attention.
Okay, we're looking at a location here. Why are we seeing a location?
Well, as it was described by Joe Morrison, if there was a ping and a location drop, the QRF was supposed to respond to that location. So he was trying it out and showing members of how it worked.
19F, please. What's happening in this part of the chat? Who's involved?
This is Pete Musico, describing his copy of the Anarchist Cookbook.
And what is the Anarchist Cookbook?
It's an old book describing a guerrilla warfare. So it's used as a manual on how to train, how to build bombs, how to create booby traps, basically how to maim or harm people.
19 GPs. What's happening in this part?
There's a reference to being on a list and how it's illegal, and it's only illegal if you get caught.
Big laser pointer here. What's an M2AB, an M98?
I believe those are references to types of ammunition.
What's this reference here to a list? I'm one of those guys that loves to know how things work, but unfortunately, the things I want to know are illegal or get you on the list.
And Your Honor, I didn't object to this exhibit, but I think we're hearing them using names, and then we're hearing them not using any names. And I think the names need to be discussed in these text messages, because from what I'm seeing, I don't see any of our clients' names on any of this text message or the one before it.
Well, he didn't object to it
Yeah, I
coming
know,
in,
but
and I'll try to get a little more detail about who's involved.
that'll work.
Can you tell me about who's involved in this?
Sure. So Ty is Ty Garvin. So he was one of the leaders of the Wolverine Watchmen on the ground floor, who we've shown on the subjects of investigation chart. Kevlar Scales is another member of the Wolverine Watchmen. I don't know his real name.
Okay, thank you. You can take that. Why again did you have to take photos of Dan's screen of his phone?
Well, we were trying to verify what he was saying is true. This was initially part of vetting him. And, he told us about the Wolverine Watchmen, and there was a lot of text messages. So we wanted to take our time and go through them and verify them. We wanted to try to see if we could identify who was making the messages. We wanted to see if Dan was actively participating. He was lying to us. And then we wanted to capture them because I recognized that they were encrypted chats, and I pitched Dan to be a source that day. And I wasn't willing to put him in danger by trying to screen capture them.
Okay. So let's talk about gangs for a second. Do you have any special training or experience in gangs?
Yes.
Tell me about it.
So in addition to the FBI's counterterrorism training, I've gone through the FBI's criminal investigator training because of my position in Flint, small office, as I described before, get involved into whatever type of violent crime, whatever comes up that day. It's a violent city. And so I've had quite a number of experiences in cases involving gang investigations. Specifically, I helped run the sex trafficking task force out of Flint, which involved a lot of juvenile prostitution by gangs in Flint.
So how many years do you think you have of experience with gangs?
Probably 5 or 6 years.
And can you tell me about some common characteristics of gangs?
Sure. They oftentimes wear colors or wear a uniform. There's terminology or jargon that they use amongst members so that they can communicate and have an awareness without outsiders being able to understand them. There's symbols that they would use to identify themselves that they wear, with their uniform, or they'll flash the symbols or they'll make references to the symbols. So I guess the standard things you think about for a gang, the uniform, the symbols, the terminology they use.
Did you do your own research into the group after you met with Dan and he told you some initial things about it?
Yes, I did.
And what do you, when I say research into the group, was it publicly available information or some super secret stuff?
No, I just typed Wolverine Watchmen into Facebook, and then I looked up who were members of the group and who were the administrators and what were they promoting.
Okay. I want you to take a look at exhibits number, first look at exhibit number 20, please.
Yes.
What is that?
A screen capture of the Wolverine Watchmen Facebook profile that I received from Task Force Officer Brett Orvis from Mount Morris Township, before I met with Dan.
When did you get this? Or when was this taken?
This would have been just before I met with Dan on March 17th. So it would have been a day or two before that first meeting with Dan.
Okay, and is it fair and accurate as to what you saw on that day?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. I'm gonna move for submission.
No objection.
No objection.
No objection.
Admitted.
Put number 20 up, please. Tell us what we're seeing here.
This is a screen capture of the publicly available Facebook profile of the Wolverine Watchman.
Got an identifier on the top left corner of the group. That's the group page on Facebook. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And there's a button up there, join group, right?
Yes.
It shows some admins. If you could, for me, Agent Harris, if you could zoom in to the top right corner. Tells you when the group's created, is that right?
Yes.
You could zoom back out. How many members did it have at that time?
42 members.
And could you zoom in on the section on the bottom, group rules from the admins? Please. Did you review this screenshot?
Yes, I did.
Okay, did you see anything that was concerning about what you were seeing there?
Yes. Number 4 and 5, those rules were concerning to me.
Okay, so the first one is no reporting. We do not need the Zuck here. What does that mean?
That's in reference to Mark Zuckerberg. So if you get kicked off Facebook, you get zucked. So they just don't want Facebook to kick them off.
What about rule 2 and 3? Are those, have you ever seen things like that before?
Yeah, these are the standard rules. I think Facebook encourages these to their groups.
Okay, and then what's number 4?
That says Mujahideen only. No feds, statists, cops, bootlickers, or commies or ethno-nationalists.
And we talked about what is a statist?
Statist is somebody, it's a political ideology, somebody who believes in a strong central government.
What are bootlickers?
Bootlickers are citizens who are subservient to law enforcement or the military.
How do you know all these terms, by the way?
These are common terms in domestic terrorism. So through my training experience, I've ran across these.
What are commies?
It's short for communists.
And what are ethno-nationalists?
Ethno-nationalists are those white supremacists or black separatists, people that believe that your nation of origin, so your race or your color or your skin makes you superior to others just based on your skin color or your nation of origin.
What about rule number 5?
OPSEC, no personal data here, general data only, no planning, only networking. Take that to wire or face-to-face.
What was concerning about these rules?
Well, it was pretty clear that they were organized, and because they said no planning here, I was worried that they were planning elsewhere and that they had a separate means for a separate way to communicate where they could actually come up with plans.
Work it out for
I'm
I
telling-
think you have to, I think you have to sign back on.
I'm already on.
you. You have to go out.
Green light on, so maybe it's on.
I don't like some of it right now.
Andy knows the green light's on.
Stare me right in the face. Don't like it much.
Well,
For some reason, my screen is not on that.
Help the staff never around. I've been so lost.